Apparently, software quality is worse than ever. Is that really true? Let's think about this. So a common trend I've noticed since the advent of AI agents, out of nowhere, we're hearing about random people giving their opinions on software quality. And when you look at this person's code, you're going to see a bunch of spaghetti that barely works and is duct taped together. But he knows what it means to be of software quality. Now, this article we're reading today, titled "Nothing Works and Everyone is Euphoric." The main focus of this article is on software quality. He talks about how people are token maxing themselves into hospital beds and scrambling to capture some of that market value before everything is automated away. The bosses have way higher expectations of our work output. And really, I think you could say, new grads or people that are just now getting in have much less leeway compared to before. I think most companies expect you're not going to do much for the first 6 months when you're a new grad, possibly even a year. You're learning team dynamics, the code base itself, right? This is pre-AI. Right now, it's like, okay, well, this should be a lot smaller. We have these AI agents, they can get you up and running a lot quicker. And in this way, I think it's pretty unfortunate because especially as a new grad, a lot of what you learn, right? You have to attend meetings. There's a lot more tracking that you have to keep aware of, making your manager like you, right? There's so many variables that go into your day that isn't just about coding. But now, with the high expectations with AI, certainly that has impacted quite a bit. And so this article does harp on the expectations. He mentions they may have upgraded the average skill set of software teams in a way we have not seen before. But he's arguing that software has actually gotten worse in quality, right? He even says, why does software keep getting worse? Now, before we dive into his arguments, I want to get an idea of the alternative perspective. Here we have the the guy that you keep seeing on your feed with the freaking roundest head on earth. This guy is out here saying software isn't precious anymore. In the new world, high quality software is infinitely available. All right, so I'll just lay down my thoughts. I think quality has gone up. I really do. I think the average dev has so much more potential to release quality. Yeah, it feels like the average dev's quality has gone up a lot. The experienced dev, I don't think their quality went up that much, but their output went up, right? So if this is our quality bar, I would say the experienced dev's quality has gone up, but not quite as high. But definitely their output has gone up as a result. So this is my point of view, what I've observed. And this comes from working on a team. This comes from being in the software space 24/7. And it also comes from just trying new websites and new products. But I think it's worth double clicking here because when I say quality has gone up, really what I mean is I think average quality has gone up. Certainly this isn't always the case. I think there are realms where the quality is hit differently. But I absolutely, without a doubt, believe the bottom bar has been raised. Pre-AI, you might run into a website that was just absolute dog. But nowadays, the bar has definitely gone up. I feel like if you just go to random sites, pretty much every flagship model can produce a really good UI now. I also think it's worth mentioning, and this tweet here from Kashi calls it out, which is that software engineering is genuinely hard to do. That just because we have AI does not mean everything is made easy. There are things that are just as difficult as before, if not harder, because of how much code we have going out in such a short period of time. Before, it was very hard to get to the point of releasing quality on your own. Right? Getting to this bar on your own before was unheard of. Right? You needed a team for this, or you needed to have like many years of experience to even have a chance at this. But nowadays, it's pretty much at everyone's fingertips. And so he gives out a few examples of this dissatisfaction that he had. He mentions that a banking app requires, on average, 3 Face ID logins before the 3D secure confirmation view appears. And I don't believe I've ever ran into this issue. Typically, mine is very straightforward. You just do your Face ID and then you're brought in. Also, I'm not fully convinced that bank apps even have AI in their systems yet. I mean, certainly there is some AI code, but I mean, Face ID has been around 2017. So if you really think they rewrote their entire Face ID code recently because of AI, I would say I've never ran into this, but I could see this being a frustration point. I opened Slack on Mac OS and the icon kept bouncing in the dock for a few seconds. I got impatient, switched to Ghosty and started typing. Just then the Slack window appeared, stole focus from Ghosty, and the git pull command was sent to the group chat. I think we're looking at every little tiny thing we can find and blaming AI. I don't know. I mean, certainly this could be something that was introduced from AI generated code. I'm not going to say it's not. But so far, he's not giving me examples that scream, oh, that must be because of that. Goes on to say my LG fridge started making weird sounds, so I started to file a warranty claim. I can pretty much promise you, unless this guy bought a fridge recently, that there is no AI generated code in this LG fridge. I mean, I would have to know the year of his fridge, I really would. But he does comment about a warranty claim, so maybe this is his main thing he's focused on. He says, it failed with a submission error at the very end, and I only found out because I looked at the JavaScript console. So he's not harping on the fridge being broken, even though he led us down that start. Here's the thing, if you're gonna give examples and you specifically call out software, my recommendation is don't lead this way, right? You led with the specific point of issue in these two, Slack banking app, and then all of a sudden you made me wait till the end of the damn. Okay, anyway. My LG fridge started making weird sounds, so I tried to file a warranty claim through a multi-step form with countless fields. It failed with a submission error at the very end. This has been around since the dawn of freaking time. I would say if you're coding with a modern model today, and this failure, he doesn't go into depth, but it could be, could it be an API error? Maybe, I guess you could say, oh, well, you shouldn't have to look at the JavaScript console to see that. Like, I think I could actually stand on business with this statement. I really don't think, like, if you were to just prompt it and say, hey, make me a set of forms for this warranty claim, I find it really hard to believe a model would even risk this user experience issue. The next thing, my car's infotainment system got a software update recently. Oh God. It was never great to begin with, but at least it didn't reboot itself during every drive. Now it's riddled with bugs. This I can attest to. Car software has always been an annoyance for me. He doesn't go into the specific model of his car. I know depending on the car model, that's gonna vary. Some put more weight on their software. But anyway, I think we can ultimately view this as like, okay, this could have happened pre-AI. No strong argument has been made yet as to it being a worse quality overall, but let's see if he convinces us as we go further. And so he does call out, he does give benefit of the doubt, he can't know the full story. But the thing that he kind of loses that on is he specifically says, I'm willing to bet that most of the teams behind those bugs have access to the latest models. So like this right here, I really have a hard time believing, and I wouldn't be so strong in my wordage here, right? I'm willing to bet. I would say a lot of the symptoms I'm seeing here, I've never experienced or would never expect a flagship model to produce. Also, like, especially with things like banking apps and LG fridge, these issues you're running into, possibly not even AI tampered code. In fact, I would say the AI might not have made these mistakes if you used AI. He ends this sentence by saying LMs can be really good at squashing bugs if given the chance. I don't know how that supports his other portion here, but we'll continue on. Software has always had bugs, and the nostalgia for good old macOS Snow Leopard era when everything was stable is mostly the product of selective memory. But you have to realize this isn't just because of AI, it's also because of scope. Apple as a company has become a complete evolution, right? When did Snow Leopard come out? 2009. And so since then, they've added so many devices to their chain of devices, right? Since 2009, they did have iPhone, but let's be honest, they've made advancements there. They've had the watch, started making their own silicon, right? All these things. And you might ask, like, oh, why does that matter? These aren't Mac OS. But the thing is these do have some underlying feature that coincides with Mac OS, right? The scope has increased by adding on all these different pieces of hardware. Not to mention, Mac OS has a lot of different products, right? They have the Air, they have the Pro models, they have the desktop models. So the scope has changed a lot, and definitely that has an impact a little bit on the overall quality here. It's not just AI. He even calls it out, right? He says because it was much simpler. Personally, I don't run into many issues with macOS. I'll say that right off the gate. But I think it's important to make a note, their scope was so much simpler. Since then, we have kept coming up with new abstractions, new front-end frameworks, and more infrastructure complexity. The bar for user experience has kept rising, but everything has become increasingly fragile. And so the argument he's making here is, at least from what my interpretation, is that yes, AI has improved our user experience side, but at the cost of fragility. Points he was making earlier, from what I interpret, he's arguing that yes, maybe these are improved in their user experience through AI, but these cases that he ran into are a result of the fragility of the software, which I can see some arguments to be made there. But at least from my experience with the models, all these issues in general, I think you could have had these pre-AI. And so he goes on to say this isn't a rant against AI, which you can't, here's the thing, okay? You can't do this. You can't say this, right? If we go back up and we say all this stuff about AI and token maxing, and then all of a sudden we're saying it's not about AI. Come on now. But I think you got an idea of his point of view from this article. I think his argument is mainly that, hey, yes, these metrics might be going up, but overall, the fragility of our software is also going up with it. So I think there are some valid concerns here that he's making. I think the examples he gave weren't the best. I think I would have rather him not even give examples and then go into this argument about the fragility, because fragility is a good point, right? On the surface, a lot of these websites that we're running into today, they look great on the surface and you can get to where you want to go. But if you really boil it down, that becomes a bigger concern. However, you can't say that AI was, the direct cause of this. Really, this is the lazy program. These are people that didn't fully test their end-to-end solution. Maybe they just whipped it up and then said, hey, it looks good to me, and send it off. But this is a real concern. And so I am going to agree with the article poster on this part. If we boil down what quality means, I think you can boil it down to robustness and simplicity. At least these are my metrics, right? If I go to a website and it gets me where I want to go and I didn't have any negative feeling towards the website, it achieved it. And so his argument here is that, hey, with fragility going up or going down, actually, hold on, I need to reverse these. Fragility means it got worse. And so with experience comes edge cases. I think that the more projects you work on, the better you get at thinking about this stuff. Overall, I feel like, the fragility of the average dev hasn't gotten worse. I think their output has just gotten higher. And so you see more bad output, right? Pre-AI, it used to be that for an engineer to, have like a lot of projects, it took a lot of time. And so in pre-AI, I felt like the average dev, they might have produced 1 to 2 projects over the span of like a year. Whereas now, you could pump out potentially 10 to 20. Now, the average dev now has way higher output. And so although, in my opinion, the fragility hasn't really changed, because their output has gone up, it looks that way, right? They're able to pump out a lot more average software just because of their higher output. Now, I do believe the quality has gone up on average still, right? Yes, the fragility might be the same and they're just going straight pumping out projects and features, but I really don't believe the fragility has gotten worse. I really don't. I think there's just more chances that they release something, and so you might run into more cases like this. But if you're like me, and as Dax mentions here, I filled out a form today and it didn't completely suck. To me, this has been my experience, right? I feel like the average piece of software I use today, I find it just works. Whereas back in the day, dude, if you used something and it had a GUI, that was like, what the hell? This is freaking advanced technology. And if the GUI actually worked, you were even more amazed. And all these issues that, Piotr here is mentioning, these were all there pre-AI. I do resonate with some of the examples he gave. And so I'm going to stand on business and say a new flagship model especially would not do something like this. But let's just assume this is true. I do think there are going to be cases where we're going to run into these. But this was before AI, right? This wasn't even an AI's fault type of deal. I think the issue here isn't that the fragility has gotten worse, more so that the fragility hasn't improved for the average dev, right? When you first start your project on day one, this is not where, the fragility and quality is really made, right? This fragility and quality issue, this happens way down the line, right? This happens when you've been developing it for freaking 15 days, more than that, really, months, years, possibly. Every day that goes by, the quality, in theory, assuming, you're actually working on the same features, the hope is that it gets better and better over time. The main issue that I've seen is that a lot of people stop early, especially with vibe-coded apps. They'll stop at day 1 and then they don't go to day 15. This isn't technically an issue with AI. I feel like testing and validation, a lot of it is a user experience thing, right? AI cannot get every single edge case. You could be using a different size device. You could be using a whole different device entirely, a different operating system, yada, yada, yada. This stuff gets figured out over a long period and not just in one day. AI cannot give you every edge case in one day. This comes from constant feedback, issues, repeated yada, yada, yada. And one problem I have with this article is some of the claims are a bit crazy. I think this part here, he talked about how he saw a LinkedIn thread by a PM that redesigned the car's OS. Like, this is obviously ridiculous. If this is the case, that's terrible. I really hope this isn't the case. Maybe it is, and that's sad. I'm assuming this is like a marketing thing, right? We all know PMs like to get likes on LinkedIn. And so maybe this is just them saying, oh yeah, we totally redesigned it all. I really find it hard to believe that the high quality average software is doing this, right? The bank apps, right? The Chase, Visa, whatever, they're not going to run this risk. You have to realize the stakes involved in making these mistakes. Not to mention, a lot of these, they're not technically the only bar for quality. These are very much user experience focused metrics. There's more to quality than user experience. And so like in the examples he gave when he says, oh, my banking app had Face ID logins a million times. To be honest, I would not mind this as long as the backend stuff is secure, right? When I go to a banking app, my priority is my money safe? Have they made sure that that part's robust? I don't care if they skimp on this user experience part. Quality really is a seesaw, or a teeter-totter actually. I think that's the one I'm going for. That's why, some of the examples he gave I don't even think are the best ones. The only one I could say is, okay, this makes sense, is the Mac one, but I would attribute this to Apple scope changing. It's really hard to make something stay robust when it gets more and more complicated. But the LG fridge, the banking app, right? These things are software second. They're not meant to just prioritize software. At the end of the day, I just want my banking app to freaking manage my money. I want my LG fridge to open and it be cold. Car infotainment kind of falls into that line a little bit. The software is second string for these. Certainly there are times you run into bugs, whatever. But again, I think I would attribute this to the dev ending at day 1 and not going through with day 15. Right? You can whip up a feature really quick, but it takes a lot of time of testing it out and messing with it for it to really reveal some of the issues like he's highlighting here. Anyway, this was an interesting article. Although I don't agree with its points all around, I think there are some interesting discussions to be made with it. I think the idea of fragility is actually a good one. Although I don't believe the average dev's fragility has gone down, I believe their output has gone up, and so it looks like that. But this is an interesting perspective, right?